The Odyssey. Not Nolan's best work, but not his worst work either. To be honest, I think this movie was way overhated when the trailers were coming out before the movie even premiered. But on the other side of the coin, I think it was way overhyped from all the fans of Christopher Nolan. I am going to preface this video by saying there will be minor spoilers for the movie, but this story's been out for like a really long time. So
I'll start with this. I saw this movie in a theater with no AC, so let that sink in for a sec. I think the environment impacts our experience or enjoyability of a movie, so I did not let that waver any thoughts or negative, positive emotions that I had toward this movie. I went in neutral with low expectations because of, like Luke said, the overhyped and the overhated ability of fans and non-fans of this movie. I was a little disappointed that we did not have a 70mm IMAX theater, but I enjoyed it either way.
Now, it has been a while since I've read The Odyssey, so I was kind of going into this movie blind, but I still knew a few things about it. So this movie did leave out a few small details while also taking some creative liberties, which is fine. I think it was great. Although it may not be the best or perfect adaptation of The Odyssey, I still think that Christopher Nolan delivered a pretty good movie. Now, to address the elephant in the room, the casting. There were a lot of people getting really mad and heated on the internet over certain casting decisions and even historical inaccuracies of this story. People were saying the casting was woke or whatever. Personally, if the person's race or gender isn't significant to the story or to their character, then I don't think it's as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. One example of a character being race swapped is Nick Fury. Believe it or not, Nick Fury was white in the comics, and now I can't see him as anyone else other than Samuel L. Jackson. I do think that if we're going to be complaining about miscasts for certain characters, I believe the whole movie is miscast. If it was truly historically accurate, then I don't think we would have a guy from Massachusetts playing a Greek soldier. Just saying. I do believe that the people defending the casting are also wrong, calling everyone who's mad soft or racist or whatever it is, because I guarantee that they would be just as mad if we made a Black Panther movie starring a white person or race swapped Tiana from The Princess and the Frog. So it goes both ways.
The casting didn't really affect any part of the story. Yes, it was hilarious seeing an Indian guy saying, "We are Greeks." It was so funny, and it did honestly take me out of my experience for a second. However, I don't think that the casting was an issue for this movie. Think of it as a play. When you go to a play, you have either kids or people being casted for this play. They can either sing, they can act. Whatever their acting ability is depends on their role. You're not going to see a whole cast of Greek people in a play that you're watching or a Broadway musical. You won't see any cast completely devoted to that race. Also, this is Christopher Nolan's vision of the Odyssey and putting it to life on screen. So think about that.
If you just look past all the historical inaccuracies with armor or casting with certain characters, then this movie is pretty enjoyable, and I think it's really good. Originally, I was swayed a lot by the internet when it came to this movie, especially all the critiques about this whole ordeal, but I eventually switched my lens, switched my focus to just watch this movie as a story rather than an adaptation that had to be one-for-one perfect.
If you go watch this movie, there is a scene that took me out of the experience for a second as well. The scene is inside the Trojan horse where they show the guys hanging out, and when you go see this, make sure to pay attention. The Asian guy is chewing gum. It's crazy. It looks like he's chewing gum. Like, what is the detail for that? Come on, guys.
Now, something that did kind of disappoint me in this movie was the color grading. It felt very flat in some moments and bland. I felt like there wasn't a lot of color or a lot of depth in certain scenes, so that was a bit disappointing. but that's not too big of a gripe. Now, one gripe that I do have that is pretty big is the pacing and the cutting of the movie. I felt like the pacing of the movie was too fast during certain segments of the movie. The Odyssey, the original story, there's a lot going on with Odysseus and his crew sailing home, going through all these different trials. It's a lot. So even though this movie is close to 3 hours long, they still couldn't fit all that in. And what they did fit in, it felt kind of rushed in certain parts. And then also just the cutting of certain scenes. I didn't like the way it was cutting and the way that the story flowed. It was jumping like into the future, flashbacks. It didn't seem very linear to me.
Let's get to the story. The story was great. It was a good version. I was glad that we had a 3-hour movie and we got what we did. The story was well condensed. I'll have to disagree with Luke. I think what they did put in the movie was good for the story and the plot itself, and it was enjoyable. It was a good 3-hour movie. I will have to disagree again with Luke on the pacing of the story. I think the storytelling aspect felt like it belonged within this story. It was cool seeing Odysseus' son go out and ask people what happened to him, and then they told the story, and then we get parts of the story added on throughout the movie. I think this works great within a movie, but not a TV show. Shout out Acolyte. I think the main standout for me was Odysseus' arc. He goes through all of this battle, 10 years of hanging out on a beach, 10 years unleashed into the city, and then there's shame. There is survivor's guilt. How does Odysseus come back home as a warrior, as a person, as a man leading his troops? All of his troops go through things, and coming back home to that, from that, is a weight on his shoulders. And so there's a sort of redemption arc at the end that we get to see from Odysseus, and it was just cool to see that written in. And I really enjoyed that character development written into this story.
Some standouts for me were definitely the use of practical effects in this movie. Seeing a boat full of all these soldiers in the middle of an ocean, just on the waves, whether it was filmed in an actual ocean or even on like a sound stage, it looked incredible. And even the Cyclops, which I just found out today, was mostly practical with a blend of some visual effects. They used a giant puppet as well as forced perspective and green screening a human into the scene. They used all the different techniques, and it looked incredible in the movie.
The sets, the environments, so good. Man, watching them build that horse and then having it built and coming out of it, that was an awesome part of the movie. I think the sack of Troy was great too. It was so fun to watch it being destroyed, and just the rampage of the Greeks going in the city, killing people. I think it was awesome. It was so cool. I also enjoyed each island that the Greeks went to and Odysseus was a part of. It was cool seeing an actual island and them rowing up to it, and it was all practical. There was no VFX that you could tell, and it was awesome. I think the blend of CGI and practical effects were great. You couldn't even tell because Christopher Nolan mainly uses practical effects, so whatever he did put in there, like Luke said with the Cyclops, was just amazing. I loved it.
Another thing to commend this movie for is kind of the horror factor, which I didn't even expect going into this. First, the Cyclops, that was scary, especially with the sound design attached to that. I think the sound design was amazing. It was shaking the whole theater. But then also with this scene with pigs and stuff. And if you know what I'm talking about.
Alone at the edge. One thing that Luke and I were talking about was the writing. We did not think that it was perfect in every scene, though it was pretty good. However, there were some instances where it just felt stiff. It didn't deliver in a way that we were enjoying it. So, what can you do? I think, again, there are some instances where it's hard to write for like past language and people speaking it nowadays, especially when everyone has an American accent. Like, what is up with that? If this is a Christopher Nolan film, there has to be a level of expectation for the writing. We need quality. We're looking for quality, not just in the camera quality, but in the writing and acting quality as well. The sound design was amazing. Ludwig Göransson doing this movie was incredible. I know we've had Hans Zimmer and other composers back in Christopher Nolan films, but Ludwig Göransson is a wonder in this film. I had heard rumors or even just talk about Nolan not wanting modern instruments for this movie because they didn't have that back then. And I think Göransson delivered. You could tell that there were instruments in there that you hadn't heard in a long time or even haven't heard before. And the way that he sets up tension, the way that he puts emotion in these instruments and the soundtrack, just amazing. Incredible.
I know I've been dogging on this movie a little bit, so is this movie worth watching in theater? Yes, I think so. Especially if you have a theater with really good sound quality. It's going to be great. However, I also feel like this movie is a one-time watch kind of movie, personally. I've watched it in the theater. I don't think I'm ever going to watch it again. It's not like Interstellar or even Inception or previous Christopher Nolan films. But that doesn't make it any less good.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content coming your way.